Hello YouTube, Stainless here. I'm going to talk a little bit about knives, and like I usually do, talk about tools that we EDC, but there's a little bit of a twist on this one. I've always been a sucker for a good story. Growing up, a region that I live in, I've heard a lot of stories like Llorona, this lady in white that you pass by on the highways or dark, lonely streets. Different stories, and they're related to culture. Some of them may be shared across cultures in this area. But my father was full of them, all of them. Lechusa, and I just ate them up growing up. I remember when he would tell me these stories, man, I just lived for it. They were great. There's one story that for some reason has come to my mind lately. I thought, you know what, let me share this with people. They get a little peek into culture understanding. Remember a lot of the stories that he shared that were told to him, passed down to him, always had some type of, well, not always, but some of them, pretty much always, had religious underpinnings to them, or some historical influences. I guess the archetypes, Latino, Mesoamerican archetypes. And I think going forward, I wouldn't want to share some of these stories on my channel. So just bear with me if this isn't your cup of tea, but this is one story that always captivated me. And it had a corollary, or compared to, again, when I was very young, a Star Trek episode. And you'll probably be able to guess which one if you're an old Trekkie TOS Star Trek fan, TOS. The story probably takes place late 19th century or early 20th century. From what my dad told me, now he wasn't reading from a Michael Crichton novel, to be sure, so details were sparse. In fact, well, I'll get to the point of the knives. Now, going back to that period, the gentleman involved may have carried something like these patterns. They're probably workers, so they carried a workman's knives. You have your Barlow here, a Stockman pattern, a Trapper, little Stockman, but this is kind of too modern for the era that we're going to be talking about. Of course, one of my favorite blade steels, because it reminds me of my grandfather and those times and traditions. 1095 steel, and you can see they've developed that patina. This one's pitted and rusted. Unfortunately, I had to rescue it. It's a rescue knife. This one was given to my father. This I acquired on eBay. But here's the story goes. I'm 4 or 5 years old when my dad first told it to me. It was the evening time. It was a rural area, very isolated. Some gentlemen had got together, high-tech graphics, and spared no expense. And they were hanging out, maybe drinking a little bit, and they decided one of them had dogs, hunting dogs, probably bloodhounds or something similar. And again, not big on details. And started talking about how his dogs were great hunters and they could, track and tree these animals, and, he would end up as his dinner eventually. So I guess they were bored. They didn't have internet or pay-per-view. They weren't going to, pay for a fight or WWE event. So they decided, well, you know what? It's dark. Why don't we get a kerosene lantern or two and see what your dogs can do and have some fun? In the dark of night, these gentlemen headed out with the dogs. The dogs go running out into this wooded area. Imagine it probably took place somewhere in the Southwest, probably Texas, maybe brush country. Again, details, really big on details in this story. But here they are, the dogs are out doing their thing, and it's dark. Those kerosene lanterns really did not have a lot of throw that we might enjoy with our modern LED portable lighting systems that we like to carry, EDC. So this went on for a while, and they're talking, and the dogs are out there running, and they weren't looking to actually hunt, kill, or shoot anything, so they were unarmed as far as firearms go. And they could hear the dogs out in the distance. and they're just talking, enjoying each other's company. This was just for fun. Maybe they would tree a raccoon or something, or possum, and that would be the end of it. They weren't going to take any game. It was just, like I said, for fun, killing time, trying to entertain themselves. Well, they noticed that the dogs, there was something in the pitch of their barking, and it went from they have a scent or going after something to they were angry, aroused in a defensive way, or they were going to, maybe they found a wild pig and the fight was on, to suddenly, again, these dogs are out in the distance, they outpace the men. They were scared, yipping and making like their terrified noises, and they could tell that they were, from the sound of them flying through the brush, they were heading back to the men in a hurry. So the men are they were alerted, and they started kind of getting concerned. It's like, wow, they must have come across some wild game, maybe javelina, or hopefully nothing too dangerous. The dogs came back to them, and they just came up to the men, and they were looking for protection. These killer hunting dogs were suddenly scared. Something really was spooking them. So the men are on high alert. They're unarmed. At some point, when my dad was telling the story, I'm begging for details. Hey, Dad, well, did they have any weapons at all? And this is where the knives came in and said, well, they're probably carrying pocket knives, which they're nothing that you would want to defend your life with. Yes, you could cut somebody, but if something dangerous like wolf or wild boar pigs coming at you, yeah, these are not going to serve you very well in that regard. So they're the men, you can tell, spared no expense, or can tell they're agitated, tell the dogs are agitated, heading back towards them. They quickly became aware of something moving through the brush towards them, and it sounded like it was large and heavy, because small trees, branches were cracking, and it sounded like something was plowing through the ground. They were just freaked out. They were concerned. It's like they're straining with their eyes to pierce the night, the darkness. These kerosene lanterns really didn't have any kind of a throw. They barely illuminated the ground under their feet, and whatever it is was fast approaching them. And of course, it stayed yards outside of the glow of their lanterns, the little area that their lanterns lit up. My dad described it as a mound, a large mound. Maybe that's too large. When I would press him about it, he said it was about the size of our dinner table. At the time, our dinner table was about 4.5 feet wide and about 5 feet long. It was a nice sized dinner table for our family. We would host guests and have Thanksgiving sometimes, and it helped out a lot. It was that size. It was low to the ground. In the darkness, the most they could make out was that it was a mound. It looked like just a pile of earth, and it began circling their position. They had nothing in their experience out in this area, in these woods, this brush country, to give them any kind of an answer for what it could be. Super large armadillo, it just didn't seem to explain it at times. From what they could just glean, which is just the outside shape of it, it appeared as if it was burrowing under the ground. It was covered with the earth, and just maybe a foot or two underground, earth was forming the oval over it. Dogs are whimpering. They're out of the game. They're not going to be any help. Gentlemen are rightfully so fearful. This is something they have had no experience with. They had no way of explaining. To make matters worse, it appeared that this mound, as it was described, this bump in the ground, large bump in the ground, was circling but getting closer and closer. Seemed like it was checking them out and deciding it was going to go in, maybe get a meal or harm them or something. And there was a noise, like almost a rumble, and there was vibrations in the ground. It seemed like it was moving just beneath the surface of the ground, pushing this earth aside. And of course that added to their trepidation and concern. One of their members happened to be a deacon at the parish church. No weapons, mind you, besides their pocket knives, which really were not going to be up to the task of taking on whatever this was. He began to pray loudly. And one of the other gentlemen started saying their own prayers. His prayer was more ordered and deliberate. He began praying for their protection. God, Jesus Christ, Mother Mary could intervene on their behalf. And he kept praying and praying. Immediately, it seemed that the prayers just seemed to agitate this mound, this creature, this unknown cryptid. But there came a point where it seemed to retreat. It made a couple of more circuits. It became wider and wider, orbiting out, and it finally retreated back into the woods, the wilderness, and the darkness. And vibration was gone, the sounds of its movement were gone. They heard it making its exit through the brush, and the dogs calmed down. Pretty soon the night was silent. Background noises, if there were crickets or whippoorwills, those noises came back. These gentlemen hightailed it back to home. Not a lot of details. It was the story, and probably if there were some more details, they were lost through the retellings. But just the idea of that was enough to terrify a 4 or 5-year-old when I first heard it. And that story always stuck with me. And I remember that, yes, back then, gentlemen, especially workmen, all men, gentlemen, carried a pocket knife, and it was not a weapon. It was a tool. They would use it for their work. Maybe if they were in an office, open packages, mail, sharpen pencils, make minor repairs. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Yes, you can make repairs with a pocket knife. Very oftentimes these were the multi-tools. In fact, something like this, thousands of years ago, would have made you a god to our Neolithic ancestors. But that's the story I have, and I've thought about it over the years. And again, you have that religious component. There's no creature that I know of that would foot the bill as far as that mysterious cryptoid in the story in this area or anywhere that I've heard of. But it was an interesting story. And again, like I said, there was that religious component. Prayer seemed to ward it off. Maybe it wasn't an actual animal. It was spiritual in nature. But that's what I have for you this evening. I hope you enjoyed that little story. Again, it was something that was passed down. I think I've only heard it within my family. But that's what I have for you. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day.